I tell you one thing that always amazes me is the amount of people that come to survival class thinking that food is going to be the issue for them. And very quickly, they learn that most likely they came unprepared in the clothing department. So, we're talking about shelter today. And our first line of defense in the woods is the clothes that we take with us. So, we know from the survival rule of three that it's like 3 hours without shelter. And that's the first thing that comes after, 3 minutes without hope. But it's 3 hours without shelter, and people think, man, I've been outside all day, and like, the weather is nothing. And the truth is, it's easy to survive the weather when we have the right clothes on, when we're outside in nice temperatures. But as people come to learn very, very quickly in survival class, the temperature can be really brutal. And even on the same day, a little bit of moisture in the air makes things unbearable. This is why we talk about like keeping your knee off the ground when you're doing bow drill, so you're not picking up moisture in your pants. Why we talk about like having heavy boots that come up to your mid calf, so that as you're walking through tall fields, you're not picking up that moisture, because ultimately that moisture is zapping your energy. That moisture is making it more and more difficult for you to be comfortable out in the woods. And things can change very, very quickly, particularly when you are wet. So, our first line of shelter is our clothing. Are we steering away from like cotton and synthetic fabrics to more of like brain tan, or more wool, because wool insulates when it's wet. But the biggest thing to differentiate between when we're thinking about shelters and thinking about exposure is where is the heat source coming from. When we have the right clothing on, where we've insulated ourselves and we're actually like keeping the body heat in. And so that's the same. This is why we teach the debris hut as the very first survival shelter. Maybe so you can lump kind of the debris bed and the debris hut into the same place. One just has more framing materials, so you can come and go easily. It's harder to make, but in the first day, we're just collecting debris and trying to get as much insulative material in our location so that we can insulate ourselves, like the right type of clothing. So let's say you're caught out in the woods and you don't have the right clothing. How can we make like not, so let's say we have a t-shirt on, all we and we need more of like a winter coat. The move is to tuck your shirt in and fill it up with debris, and it insulates you so that your body heat can radiate and then warm you when the rain is coming, when you haven't prepared the right clothing to be out in the right environment. Survival is all about percentages, and the way that we want to make sure that we have the highest percentage of being comfortable in the wilderness and like surviving is by making sure that we're not putting out a whole lot of effort. So calories in, calories out. You hear it with dieting and losing weight. If you're only expending, if you're expending 2,400 calories but only eating 2,000, you're going to be losing weight over time. In survival, we want to do the opposite, right? We want to expend the least amount of energy while eating the most. And one way that we can do that is differentiating between cover and shelter. Now, how do we differentiate? We have a very clear definition. One is just a covering from rain, whether it be a tarp or like rain gear or a lean-to or like a thatched sort of roof, or like palm leaves, whatever. We're covered from the rain. But shelter has to have a heat source. So we teach the debris bed, the debris hut, because those have an internal heat source. They use our body heat like a sleeping bag does. If you've ever been camping and not had a ground pad, that stuff underneath you is compressed. But The debris hut, the debris bed, it keeps us. So we have a whole lot, an insulative sleeping bag that has a lot of room from the ground and the contacted area. And the heat source, just like the sleeping bag, our body is radiating out into the sleeping bag, and the heat is contained. And our body heats it up really quickly. And like nothing is toastier than our really great and insulative sleeping bag, except the debris hut and the debris bed when you build them correctly. So we differentiate in that way between shelter and cover. Shelter has to have a heat source. And it doesn't have to be our body. But if we're talking about calories in, calories out, there's a whole lot of expenditure in collecting that firewood. People are amazed to find out that in the coldest environments, this is a quote from Morris Kahansky. He's a very famous boreal forest survivalist up in like the coldest parts of Canada. But he has he'll tell you straight up that one person for one evening without a reflective wall around the fire, that's something that we teach to make shelters more effective. But without a reflector wall and out without taking into account like the fire science and the dynamics of like reflecting heat back at you, you're going to need in so let's if we're split logs, like if you're buying logs at the store, we're looking for a cord of firewood, right? So what does that mean? That means stacked firewood that's 4 feet wide, 8 feet long, and 4 feet high. That's to get you through the coldest nights in the boreal forest. So if you have to cut all that wood, if you have to stack it, if you have to bring it to your campsite where you're going to be staying for the evening, that's a lot of calories out. So this is why we focus so hard, and you know this if you've been to our camps and our survival classes, that like 30 more tarps, get more debris, because that way we can pull ourselves into a heavily insulated environment and not have to be getting so much firewood together, because the debris is lightweight compared to doing that every night, night after night, while relying on your hunting, your trapping, your survival fishing to make that survival situation like livable. So we built a super insulative shelter, and we crawl inside and we're happy. And then we can go to bed, and that helps because we've limited our calories in, calories out. But ultimately, we've differentiated between cover and made like a real shelter. So if you don't have the debris hut and you don't, let's say you just have a tarp, we need to heat that some way. It's often very difficult to build a fire inside a tent, right? Like there's special stoves that get that accomplished for you. But the hard part is how do we get the fire inside? And people that have come to our survival class know, and I want to share this with you because this really might save your life. One, building a debris hut, I know it'll save your life. I've spent plenty of time in those things. They're super comfortable, and in any given temperature, based on if you build it right. If you need directions, come see us. We'll definitely show you how to do that in survival camp. But let's say you need to heat something that's not optimal. The way we do that is by heating rocks in the fire. So we can build a fire, build a raft of logs, have the rocks heating up and burning so that we can pull them into our shelter. Now, we're not sleeping on top of these hot rocks. Don't do that. Hear me out. Don't do that because you're going to burn yourself. But the way that you can add a little bit of extra heat without having a fire inside your tent is by taking those hot rocks, putting them into a trench, and covering them back up with dirt. So that's going to allow your survival hut that doesn't have the right insulation to be really, really warm, so that the next day you can get more insulation, and that way we don't have to be collecting firewood all the time. But that's a key difference that might keep you alive in a survival situation. Most survival situations are over in 72 hours, provided that you've told somebody where you're going and when you're going to return. But the truth is, when you're out for long periods of time and you don't know when you're coming back to society, calories out versus calories in is the most important thing. And the way that you can maximize those calories and be happy in a survival situation is by making sure that your shelter is good and it's really well insulated. And so remember, the difference between shelter and cover is a fire or a heat source inside, and that might be the fire in your heart that keeps going. We talk about mindset all the time. We talk about how to better your situation little bit by little bit, whether it's, survival, homestead, sales, business development. It's all the same. That positive mental attitude, that fire inside is what continues to drive us. But we can't do anything if we're losing heat to the natural world. So build a great shelter, insulate it heavy, and I know that you'll get through any survival situation and any problems that will arise because you are collecting firewood. So calories out, calories in. How do we build a fire in a suboptimal shelter? These are all the things that we teach in our survival classes and in our survival essentials workbook that is available at sustainablehomestead.com. While you're there, sign up for our Homestead Mastermind. We have a group of like-minded individuals that every week get together and discuss topics like these. We ask questions, we share stories. It's on an online Zoom call every Wednesday at 6:30 Eastern. You can find that information to that at sustainablehomestead.com. Thanks for watching this video. Look for more comments.